tagliata, messa fuori, c'è Pirlo, ancora Pirlo di tacco, tiro, gol!
Hello and welcome to this week's AC Milan Talk podcast. I'm your host Samit Paul, and as always I'm joined by my good friend Jason Brown. JB, how you doing?
I'm doing good, mate, doing good.
Good man. Right, Jace, plenty more to discuss tonight as we react to the Dortmund defeat, all the latest transfer talk as well as financial fair play. We talk tactics and Milan's search for the final piece of the puzzle. First, Jace, let's start with that Dortmund game. 3-1 defeat. Nuri Sahin, double from Aubameyang, while my boy Carlos Bacca managed to get on the score sheet for Milan. For me, Jace, there's a little bit of an element here of it's kind of almost pointless to analyse this game too much and take too much away from it. I'm looking at the names that were absent from this match. We've got Bonucci, Biglia, Conti, Romagnoli, Suso and Silva. Add all those guys into a mix and I believe it'd be a completely different story. And then also on the other side of it, Dortmund have got the German Super Cup coming up at the start of August against Bayern. So for me, I believe this was their last game of the International Champions Cup, so they're ahead of schedule compared to us, albeit that we've obviously got to be ready for the Europa League qualifiers. But any standout performers for you? Kessie in particular was a beast again for me. A couple of tidy performances from the new boys, but what did you make of it?
Yeah, like you say, it's difficult to judge because of the team that was out. I think, I agree, Kessie played well. Compared to everyone else, I think Dortmund were impressive. It's kind of difficult when you've got quite an impressive opposition to kind of pick out standout performers in the losing side. But I agree, Kessie showed some good play. The only thing positive I take from this, like you said, it's not the team that I expect to be starting next season for Milan, and the fact that the qualifiers, Europa League qualifiers, I doubt we'll be playing a team as good as Dortmund. So I don't see this happening again. But it's a good test, really, isn't it? I think for the new boys in there, see the type of level they're going to be at. But you just want to be playing these friendlies with the team that you feel you can start the league with. I understand why certain players are missing, but I think going forward, we really need to be kind of playing as close as possible to the team that we should be starting with, and then maybe try and bring in a few youth players and see how they fare with the main squad.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I feel a little bit disappointed in that sense because we've obviously moved really quickly this summer to buy the players that we've bought. So you kind of think from that angle, well, if we move so quickly, then they should all be kind of involved and playing, getting used to settled and getting used to their teammates at this point ahead of those Europa League qualifiers and the start of the season. So a bit disappointing, but obviously circumstances. We've only just signed Bonucci and Biglia, so that's that. And then Conti, of course, was at under 21, so he had a little bit of an extra break. But yeah, I see what you mean. But I believe Bonucci, Biglia,
the majority of that squad, I assume, will be sold by the time the season starts. Yeah. So it's was a bit of a pointless exercise, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you mentioned there, just pick up on that then. So I think Paletta, Niang, two names that are definitely going to go. Bacca probably joining them. I don't think that goal's going to save him. But, but you're right. I think we saw a lot of the same old as well with those guys in particular. It's there's no change. You know what you're getting from them. Even from the likes of Abate, I think he's not going to be leaving this summer, but it's just the same story, wasn't it? Just more of the same of what we've seen, what we've grown accustomed to over the last few years. So see the new boys come in, fresh blood. I think it will be a completely different complexion. So looking forward to seeing them. Bonucci, Biglia, Conti and Silva all travelled to China today, Tuesday. So they should be facing Bayern, depending on how their fitness is holding up. So hopefully we'll have a much changed side for the next game. But yeah, enough positives to take, I think. But like you said, Dortmund's quality opposition. Just got to move on and continue our preparations, I guess. So all good.
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into this result, to be honest.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Good stuff. Right, Jace, let's move into transfer talk. We've got a lot to get through this week, of course, but I want to chat about financial fair play and tactics and all those great things a bit later, get to the meaty stuff later on. But just to kind of, go through some of the stories over the past few days, the one that kind of upset me the most was speculation linking Manuel Locatelli with a move to Juve. I'd be really disappointed, to be honest, if I saw him leave this summer, especially on a permanent deal. I understand the reasons why. All reportedly, of course. Let's not forget that. I think there's been no confirmation from Milan or Locatelli to suggest that they're pushing for a move or even just looking for a transfer in that sense. But I just feel, he is going to be restricted next season. The way that we've brought in Biglia, we've brought in Kessie. There is a lot of competition for places there, and I believe he has, dropped down the pecking order. But, for you, is there an argument that he should be kind of sitting behind those guys, like in the pecking order, ready to come in for the, I don't know, whether it be a Europa League game, Coppa Italia? Is it the right move to kind of send him out on loan, or is it definitely the wrong decision to sell him this summer?
Yeah, I think we talked about this in a previous pod, and I think at that time we were saying it would be good to keep him in the squad, like you say, there to be ready, especially with, you mentioned there, the Europa League and all the extra games, and the fact that we feel that we should be pushing for those Champions League spots next season. So it'll be good to have him there, but I can understand from the player's point of view why he'd want to go out, maybe on loan, to get more playing time. But I don't think we should be selling him at all, especially to Juve. I can understand why, if this is true, why Locatelli potentially would want to leave to go to the current Serie A champions. But I think from a Milan standpoint, we want to be keeping him. He's only 19. He's got a promising future. I know he had a bit of difficulty last season, but I think the talent is still there. It's just about him biding his time, being patient, taking his opportunity when it's given to him.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned it in the previous podcast as well, just the fact that he should benefit from having better players around him, whether that be on the training pitch every day, whether that be, taking more responsibility away from him. Last season, putting him in that deep line playmaker role, we're looking at a 19-year-old kid to kind of pull the strings in midfield for us. You play him this coming season. You've got an experienced leader like Biglia next to him. You've got powerhouse like Kessie next to him, and it's a completely different story. So I think definite no to a permanent sale. I hate the idea of that. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen. I'd be open to a loan move because, like you said, and the competition for places, maybe you can see why he'd want to leave and get regular playing time. So I'd accept a loan move, I guess. But in an ideal world, I think we should be keeping him and pushing him up the pecking order above the likes of Montella and Sosa. But yeah, that's my ideal sort of world. To see how Montella sees it, but it also brings up a kind of important point in a general sense as well. With the takeover, with all the spending that's happened, with all these experienced players that have come in, where still at a young age, relatively young age, but they've got experience from where they've come from. What's your take on the approach moving forward when you've got this much money? Because I'm also looking at Calabria's situation at right back as well. So Conte's come in, Abate will probably be ahead of him as well. What's the right approach? Do we abandon this whole youth push now, or do we try and find a balance, or what is it that Milan should be doing?
I think you have to stick with your youth. We've seen in the Premier League teams that abandon youth. They never really have that sustained success. It kind of comes and goes, and it depends on them spending a lot of money. And you never really get players who are like loyal to the team. I think once a player's coming on a big money move, looking for instant success, if that success isn't there, or if it comes and then it goes, they're ready to move on to the next thing. But when you've had players that you've kind of cultivated from a young age, they've been brought up in that Milan culture, they're waiting for their opportunity to get into the first team. And once they're there, touch wood, you'd like to think that, they'll honour it and that they'd want to do their best for Milan. And, it'll be more than just about the money. It's about, what they've been brought up in and them realising the opportunity now to play for the club. That, a lot of these players have been there from their teenage years, like mid-teens. And once you're there that young, you're just waiting for the opportunity to get into the first team. So you'd assume that they treasure it more and that they'll kind of take on the responsibility more, and they're the future of the club really. So you want to strike that balance where you bring in the players like we mentioned with Locatelli, like he can learn off. Same for Cabrillo, the players that he can learn off and develop his own talent, so that when it comes time for him to be the first team player, he just carries on that tradition of quality players in the Milan team.
Yeah, 100%. I think obviously the important factor is, of course, they've got to be good enough.
Yeah.
If they're good enough, then yep, definitely got to keep them in place and bring them through. But from what we've seen of Locatelli, I think he's got a very bright future. Like you mentioned, he did have troubles last season, a bit of inconsistency, got dropped, but I think we've seen enough to suggest that he should be sticking around and having a fairly sort of prominent role. So fingers crossed he's still around, Jace. I think it's quietened down in the last day or two, but there's always a threat, isn't there? Like you said, without that playing time, he might be looking elsewhere. But yeah, fingers crossed he sticks around. In terms of the opposite direction, we've been linked with a move for Renato Sanches from Bayern. I believe it's an initial loan move with an option to buy. What do you think of him as a player, first off? Because I never really saw much of him during his Benfica days. I know he had a sort of, I wouldn't say a terrible season, but he had his troubles at Bayern last year. So I'm only working off his performances at Euro 2016, where he was obviously pretty damn good. What do you make of him as a player for starters? Would that be a good addition to the team?
Yeah, I mean, same as you really. Like, I've only really seen him at the European Championships, and I agree. He looked really good. And I know that teams are in for him, and I was kind of hoping, maybe we'll see him in the Premier League or him get the opportunity. But like you say, he went to Bayern, it didn't really work out for him. But I think definitely, again, the talent is there. It's whether or not he'll get the opportunity to express that and to prove that he can, sustain that level throughout a season. So he would be a good addition, I think, to the team. But my only concern is, if you bring in Renato Sanches, again, that's just making things more congested in that midfield for players like Locatelli to try and prove themselves and break through. But yeah, I it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because you don't want to turn down potential quality, but then again, you don't want to kind of do that at the own risk of your own players, your own youth players. But I think if for a loan move, it'll be good. But my only concern again is I'm assuming that Bayern would want to see him play week in, week out. They're not sending him to Milan for him to sit on the bench. So you're kind of stuck there. Normally they write these things into the contracts, don't they? They need to make a certain amount of appearances. So you're kind of forced to play him, whether or not he's up to standards, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I think it kind of ties in with a question we've had from Hassan Milan Lewis on Twitter. He said, can Renato start on this team? I personally don't think he can. And it combines with your point. I mean, I just think it adds more competition than is necessary. And speaking of Locatelli just now, he might as well just pack his bags now and be done with it.
Yeah.
If Sanchez comes in, there's no way he's starting or playing. So for me, yes, I'm all in for adding more talent and having this exceptional squad with depth and brilliant quality across the board. But in that department where we've still got to offload people like Sosa, whether Montella is going to stick around for much longer, I just don't feel that there's a need, or there shouldn't be a real push for someone like Sanchez to come in. So, obviously, I guess I'd be happy if he did join. I wouldn't be fuming if he did sign. But for me, I think it's kind of an unnecessary addition. But again, it's gone a little bit quiet in the last day or so, but it's still around. So we'll have to see how that one develops. Jason, in terms of people leaving, we've had two. Let's start with Lapadula. Heartbroken, Jace. Absolutely heartbroken to see him go. He had a lovely little goodbye message as well, saying he had a memorable year and wished Milan good luck on Instagram. I'm really sad to see him go, but the question obviously that overrides all feelings and sentiment is, are we going to rue this decision to let him leave? We've spoken about him before. We know what he brings to the table. He's passionate, he's energetic, gets about the opposition, can score, didn't score regularly enough last season. But I just felt, as we've mentioned previously, that he's that perfect squad player to bring off the bench, to give everyone a lift, to grab important goals. He did score a couple of really important goals last season. I feel like we're going to miss him. But then again, obviously, you got to look at what we're bringing in. We've brought in Andrea Silva. We potentially could be bringing in Belotti. That's probably going to make sure that I don't miss him too much. I'll probably forget his name in a few weeks. But just starting off with that, is that a decision that we're going to regret, or do you think it was just the right decision for all parties to let him go?
Yeah, I think it's the right decision, to be honest. Like you say, you look at, we've got Silva, like you said, potentially bringing in Belotti. We still actually have Bakker as well. And I think if you're looking at third choice strikers, if you've got the choice between Bakker and Lapadula, I can see why some would say Lapadula because of the energy that he brings. But when you've got Silva, you already have that energy. And, Bakker, we've talked about how he doesn't really add much to the team in general, but he is a goal scorer. And I think if you need those last minute goals, he's the type of guy you can stick up top and just hope he gets on the end of something. Also, as well, we've got to mention that we've brought in Barini from Sunderland as well. Yeah. So we've got plenty of attacking options. I think it would have been a bit unfair to Lapadula just to kind of give him that false hope in thinking that he may make more appearances or even the same amount of appearances that he did last season. I think it's very unrealistic given who we've added to the team. So I think for his own career, he kind of needed to move on.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've spoken about it before, and I definitely see that side of it. Just on that side of things, I mean, if we do play a 3-5-2 next year, then I believe we're going to need 4 strikers at Montella's disposal to kind of rotate and make sure we cover, suspensions or injuries. So looking at it, Silva, Belotti, Bakker, like you say, may stick around, who knows? And then we've obviously got young lad Cutrone to come in.
Yeah.
Hopefully he can do a job for us whenever he's given an opportunity. But yeah, for you, will that be enough then? Silva, Belotti, Cutrone, and give or take maybe Bakker, or do you think there's potentially one more sort of minor signing that still needs to be added?
No, I think that would be enough. With Bruno as well in there, I think having those to choose from, it should be enough, especially when you got quality like Belotti and Silva in there as well.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think both of them played a fair amount of games last season as well. They're not like injury prone or anything, so
yeah.
Fingers crossed there won't be a need. Look at us talking as if Belotti's already joined.
Yeah. Cat and our eggs, aren't we?
No, fingers crossed. But no, all I can say is good luck to Lapadula. Absolutely loved having him at the club last season. Again, limitations in his game, but as a player, as an individual, absolutely loved him. So good luck to him at Genoa. Hopefully he doesn't score against us. That's all I can say. One man that I don't wish good luck to is Matteo De Sciglio. He's gone to Juve essentially now. He returned to Italy from the China tour to complete his move today. Reported €12 million fee, Jace. For me, I think it's an absolute result. He had a promising start to his career at Milan. Everyone obviously tipped him with those lazy comparisons, suggesting that he's going to be the next Paolo Maldini. Obviously, the similarities were there. Versatile fullback. Got a left, can use his left foot, can use his right foot. He's defensively solid, can bomb forward. There was a lot of positives to take from his game when he first came through, and you could see that he could become like a cornerstone of this team for many more years. But he's been absolutely average for me over the last couple of years. There's been absolutely no progression in his game, whether that be his crossing, whether that be his sort of positioning. All the same problems just kept coming back to haunt him, and I feel like he's completely stagnated. And we've brought in Rodriguez and Conte. So for me, I think this is a great deal. All round, 12 million fee. Do you agree with that, or do you think we're going to end up missing him?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I agree with everything you said about his stagnation. But, I think maybe he realised that himself, because he did talk about the desire to go back and to play under Allegri, my man Allegri. So maybe he feels that, the point of his career where he had a lot of promise was when he was playing for Allegri. So maybe he feels, if he's playing for him again, he can once more kick on and develop even further. But that's, difficult to say now. It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because, like you say, we're not going to be missing much, but he's still young enough. And he has shown he does have the talent, like you say, he's decent with both feet. So if he applies himself, he could be a really, really, really top player in it. Then you're kind of looking at it like, we've missed out on a good one. But then again, that being said, if he had stayed, maybe he wouldn't have developed into the great player he potentially could be. So I think as it is now, the way that things are, I think it's a great deal. But there's always that kind of thought in the back of your mind, like he could grow to be, amazing, which is always something you kind of don't want to happen, do you?
No, definitely not. No, and then also, I mean, there is a disappointing side of it. Obviously, he's one of our own, as you mentioned, like come through the ranks, and you never like to see them leave. But I just feel as well with this, the contract situation where, I don't think he's ever actually come out himself and said, I don't want to renew. But obviously, the position we're in now and constant rumours over the last month or two suggesting that he's told the club on numerous occasions that he doesn't want to renew, then he's kind of soured that relationship anyway. We saw what happened at the end of last season. So I think all round people are, Milan fans, should I say, are probably pretty happy with seeing the back of him. So.
That's a good point, actually. I forgot about that fan situation. So I think it would be very difficult for him, to even play for Milan again after that. Do you know what I mean? Like to get the fans back on side. So maybe it is best for all parties.
Definitely. No, fair enough. I mean, like I said, let's not be bitter. I hope he does well. I mean, we've seen how good he can be, and he's put in shifts for Italy over the years as well. So we'll see how he develops. But I'm very content with having Conte on the right hand side and Rodriguez on the left. I think we've upgraded definitely in that position. So no complaints from me, Jace. Good stuff. Let's move on to financial fair play. That's been the hot topic since Milan started this spending spree. I'm not going to claim to be an absolute expert in this area, Jace, but from what I've read, from the research that I've carried out, I've got an explanation for you as to why financial fair play is not being such a big issue for Milan this summer. Essentially, it boils down to the fact that because Milan haven't been involved in Europe over the last couple of years, they're not currently under the parameters of FFP. So while the likes of Inter and Roma are struggling because of their losses that they've accumulated over the last 2 or 3 years and selling their players now and not buying, players that people want them to buy and expect them to buy, Milan are free of those shackles essentially at this point. That situation will obviously change now, provided that we obviously qualify for the Europa League, get through the qualifying round coming up at the end of the month. And as soon as that happens, we are going to fall within those regulations and we do have to meet those expectations of us. And then that's when the voluntary agreement comes into play. So essentially what that will do, which has been postponed till October, by the way, obviously we put forward a plan, UEFA asked questions, and then Milan withdrew that and said we'll come back at a later date and provide you with a new proposal. So that sort of voluntary agreement essentially revolves around the fact that we've got to provide the figures and the proof of revenue to show that with the qualification for the Champions League, for example, with the plans in China, that essentially we can double our revenue as we've speculated in this proposal, and essentially we won't be sort of working at a loss in the coming years, which will then result in punishments and penalties from UEFA. So it's almost as if Milan now are taking their chance while they can. They've got freedom to spend. They won't have this same freedom to spend moving forward now that they're back in Europe. So that's essentially why they're going all out this summer, buying the players that they believe they need. And it also ties in with the fact that, with the talk of this new cycle being started, it almost puts them in a position now to be settled for the next 2-3 years, I believe. I think that's what Rossoneri and Mirabelli have set out to do. Make the most of this summer and then slow things down gradually as we move forward and hope that these players can take us forward over the next 4 or 5 years. For you though, Jace, is this almost, again, we can all be happy about what's happened this summer, but is this almost like a disaster waiting to happen for you? Because if Milan don't qualify for the Champions League, for example, if their sort of projections and predictions for the revenue in China doesn't live up to the billing, it almost strikes me as a massive, massive gamble. You've got to obviously take into account Elliott, the hedge fund involvement in this as well with their loan. Are there loads of question marks around this, or do you think that this is almost brilliant work from Milan again by spending so much this summer, knowing that obviously, beyond this summer they're going to be restricted in what they can do?
It's difficult, but I'm going to go with this is brilliant, to be honest. Only because of who Milan are and the history that they have. I think, it is a massive gamble. As we just mentioned there, everything that's involved in spending so much money and kind of putting all your eggs in one basket, to be honest. But I think the players that have brought in are good enough to get Milan back into the Champions League. Obviously, you can never really guarantee that, especially with the other teams that are in Italy at the minute. But I believe, with Montella and, the additions, especially if they can get that top striker that we talked about, Belotti, or maybe even a Aubameyang, I think they would have the firepower to get back into the Champions League. Getting Bonucci as well, massive bonus, that experienced winner. But yeah, the history, I think, of the club is going to mean that they're able, in a sense, to kind of get that revenue from China. I think that's what they're banking on. A team that's done so much in football, not just domestically, but in European football. We all know the history that Milan have in the Champions League. I think they're already a big name. And the fact that they're back on the European stage has kind of elevated them back up to where they, not right where they were, but they're kind of back on that path. They're back on that radar now. We're going to see Milan on TV in this country again. When's the last time we've seen Milan on a Wednesday or Thursday night? Do you know what I mean? So just that alone is up their exposure. So I think they'll have no issue raising the revenue needed, especially with the Chinese owners. I think what would help if they signed a Chinese player, to be honest. We saw, United use that tactic. They signed Kagawa to break the Asian market, and it worked. So I think getting a name in, selling those shirts over in China and that region of the world would help massively. But I think, that being said, if they do sign a Belotti or a Aubameyang, I think a name like that could potentially do the same thing. So we talked about it with the Bonucci as well. I think a name like Bonucci could do that too. So I think they are gambling, but I think it's a pretty safe bet, to be honest.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. I mean, what are they supposed to do? If they've got this window of opportunity, they can't just sit back and think, it's a bit risky. I don't know, should we go all in and risk it and see what happens? Like, they've got to take the opportunity, strike it while they can. True. They've done that. Like you said, Bonucci especially, I think that's going to be a massive signing. Add this striker to the whole squad, and I think we're banging in form to kind of get one of those Champions League spots. So, yeah, I mean, always a risk. I still think there are question marks, and how we bridge that gap, like I said, with the Chinese market, it's going to be huge. They've placed a massive emphasis on that. That's got to live up to it. And I think almost domestically as well, like you said, around Europe, apparently early figures are showing season tickets have kind of gone through the roof compared to last year. That's only on the first day of sales as well, so fingers crossed that continues to grow. I think the San Siro will be filled on a more regular basis with the players that we've brought in and the buzz that we've created. Obviously, council situations and stadium ownerships, it's not all going to go in Milan's pocket, but I believe it all helps. I think all the exposure, like you said, all the positive work is going to hopefully have the impact that they intend, and it kind of shows up on the balance sheet. So had to take the opportunity. I guess we'll have to wait and see now. It's all down to delivering on the pitch. So we've done what we had to do, the work off the pitch, and it's down to Montella and the players to kind of repay that faith, if you like, to deliver much needed results. But
yeah, do you think this puts more pressure on Montella to get things right, pretty much from the off?
Yeah, I believe so. I think there's that new level of pressure, isn't it, from the ownership, that if you're not going to get us back into the Champions League, if there's early indications in the season that we're going to fall short, then what's at stake, what's on the line for the club as a whole, financially, on the pitch, off the pitch? I think they'll strike and make a change as soon as they feel like it, if they think it's necessary, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you think it was a bad decision then to stick with Montella and not go for? There was a time when there was a lot of speculation about Mancini, someone who's not probably, I'd say, the most exciting manager, but someone who's proven the ability to get teams up into the Champions League spots. Do you think they should have gone that route?
I see the sense in it, and I understand. Like, there are still reservations about Montella and what he can do with this team, but for me, I think we've started something. He showed what he can do with like a less talented squad last year, got us back into Europe, and I believe he's got the tactical brain, sort of the in-game changes, just the know-how in general to kind of take us on to the next level. This is his massive break. I think this is going to be the biggest kind of job that he's had so far in his managerial career. I'm confident he can step up and piece it all together, but yeah, I'm sure, like you said, there's probably more assurances to go with someone like Mancini, but I think ownership-wise, they always wanted to stick with Montella. So yeah, I'm confident he could deliver, but we can only judge on results, can't we? So we'll have to see how the season starts. But fingers crossed, Jace. Hopefully he can make this a success, but time will tell. Good stuff. Moving on to the much talked about striker search. I'm going to start off with a poll that Michael Lisi did on Twitter for me. You can catch him at MFLISI39.
You outsourcing your polls now to me.
Hey, it was voluntary poll. I didn't pressurise him into doing it. It's very helpful, and I'm glad he did it. So thank you for that.
Cheers, Mike.
Absolutely. So it's centred around 4 options basically about who's going to fill this last role up front. 58% of those that voted went for Belotti. 26% went with Aubameyang, but we'll talk about him in a second. 13% surprisingly went with Zlatan. I think there's a few reminiscing about the good times with the big man. And only 3% went with Morata. It's worth pointing out before we continue that Aubameyang is no longer an option. Dortmund have shut that door today. By all accounts, they've said that they had a deadline in place for teams to kind of put forward a bid, negotiate. That has gone. Nobody's coming with a satisfactory offer, so I think Aubameyang is now off the table. So for me, as much as I'd love a reunion with Zlatan, I don't believe that's going to happen. I think there's more and more talk of him being offered a United deal, so I don't see that happening. So Jace, I think we're down to 3 names now, essentially, to fill this role. And that's Belotti, Morata, and Kalinic as a kind of backup option, if you like, plan C. More developments tonight. I think it's been a running theme of Milan summer, Jace. I think something always happens whenever we're recording. But according to well-respected journalist Gianluca Di Marzio, he's suggesting that Belotti is in agreement with Milan and he wants to join. And apparently the deal can be closed with Torino for 60 million euros plus Niang and Paletta. Get your thoughts on that. So, for example, let's just say that, if that was a kind of offer that Torino would be willing to accept, is Belotti your man now at the top of the list above Morata and Kalinic?
Yeah, I mean, I always put Belotti up there. I thought he was, the best option given what he did in Italy with a team who, no disrespect to Torino, but they weren't the best team.
Yeah.
They had an amazing striker, and he did a lot of that work off his own back, I believe. And I think just putting him in with better players, you'd only get better results. So someone that I was really keen on getting, and it seems that these people who took part in the poll agree. But yeah, I can understand why Belotti would be up there. I'm a bit shocked at the Morata result. I thought more people would have been in for him. But yeah, for me, Belotti's got to be the man, I think, especially with who we've brought in. I know it seems as though him and Silva are probably a bit similar.
Yeah.
But I can see, you got Belotti, who's just on fire when it comes to goal scoring, and Silva, that we mentioned Silva in the Portugal team. He kind of takes a second back seat to Ronaldo a little bit in terms that he's willing to do some of that chasing back and some of the other work, and he'll pop up with a goal or two now and again. So I think Silva could play with Belotti and kind of do a lot of the running and so on, and Belotti's just free then to try and get on the end of things and try and create goal scoring chances.
Yeah, I agree. We saw that sort of creative side to Silva, like I said, in the Confederations Cup, and I definitely see the similarities between the two. But yeah, you're right. I still believe that there's a partnership that can be made there. I know we've spoken about it to death now, and I'm just all in for Belotti. I think he wants it, Milan wants it, so let's just get it done. He's a young Italian striker, fits the mould of what we were kind of building prior to this takeover. But obviously, with the likes of Conte being brought in and Donnarumma staying, got Romagnoli there, Bonaventura, Bonucci, of course. There's a big Italian core there, so I'd like to see that kind of built on. And yeah, I think if this deal can be made, we're offloading 2 players who I believe are expendable. Day that Niang leaves, I'll probably hold a party, Jace. You are invited.
Yeah.
And Paletta, I believe, can go as well with the options that we've got at the back now. So bringing that price tag down, if we can get that deal done, I'm absolutely all in for it. So I might even get Belotti on the back of my Milan shirt this summer.
Yeah.
Haven't had that done in about 5-6 years, but I'm all in.
I thought you would have gone for Bonucci, to be honest.
I've got to go with my boy Andrea. Well, we'll see. Again, let's wait and see if he signs. I won't get it done before he joins. That's for sure. But no, all good. Let's see how it goes now. I think it keeps changing as well. I think 2 days ago there were suggestions that Morata had agreed a deal. So it swings and roundabouts. We'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I think ideally it's between those two. And if we had to choose, Belotti's the man. So let's see. That will present a separate issue, Jace. Of course, everybody's already talking about tactics and what formation Montella will use. He kind of hinted himself today after the Dortmund game that with the addition of Bonucci, a 3-man defence has kind of become a realistic option now. Let's talk about sort of the best systems that we could have. I believe it's likely to be between a 3-5-2 or a 4-3-3. I know other people have suggested on Twitter, the use of a 4-3-1-2 or a 3-4-3. Numbers flying around everywhere. I've lost the plot already. And you'll be happy to know that I held my own poll on this one. So give you the results of that first. 21% went with a 4-3-3, which is what we used last season, of course, so stick with that. 69% went with a 3-5-2. I'm assuming that obviously had a spike the day that Bonucci signs. And then there's a 10% for other. My only issue, Jace, with either of those systems is I'm struggling to fit everyone in, and especially with Belotti potentially to come in as well. I don't understand how you can stick in Bonaventura, Hakan, Suso, and the Biglia and Kessie in midfield. There's just not enough spaces to be filled here with a back three in particular. Let me just get your take on that first. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because I don't know whether I'm being too narrow-minded and not ambitious enough, but we've become so accustomed at Milan now to having this set 4-3-3. We know Suso's on the right. We know Deulofeu's on the left. We know Bacca or Lapadula through the middle up top. We kind of know the midfield trio. Is that being too kind of narrow-minded in the sense that it's good to have those headaches now, potentially moving forward, having options that big players are going to have to be sat on the bench and pushing each other to get into the team?
Yeah, I think it is. To be honest, having, like you say, that improved quality of player to bring in, and the fact that you now can kind of mess around with your formations because you have the quality within the squad. I think that's it's a good problem to have. My only concern would be the fact we're going into a World Cup year, so players are kind of they go a bit funny, don't they, around the World Cup because they just want to play. Yeah. So it may be a bit more difficult to kind of have happy players on the bench, waiting for their opportunity. You kind of get people, desperate to kind of make an appearance so they can get into the international team. But I think having, the options from the bench is always a positive. I don't see the negative side to it. And, personally, I would go with a three at the back with Bonucci, but I can see how a 4-3-3 could work with the players that we have as well. So I guess it's just up to Montella to kind of tinker a little bit and potentially kind of have different formations for different challenges, maybe domestically and Europe's a whole different kettle of fish as well. The way that certain teams set up, especially against a team like Milan. So it may be kind of more beneficial to throw more men forward and to try and break down those stubborn defences. And then in other games, it's probably more beneficial to have more of a solid base to try and, stop yourselves from conceding. So having these players at his disposal is amazing, I think.
Definitely. I'm never happy, Jay, so I'm just miserable.
Yeah.
Last season I was moaning about not enough depth, not enough quality.
Yeah.
This season
Now
I'm
it's too
moaning
much depth.
Never happy, never happy. No, it's a fair point, and I understand. I completely get the sort of argument for the 3-5-2. You got Bonucci in the centre, stepping up with the two either side of him. You got Conte and Rodriguez bombing up down the left and right. You've obviously got Biglia pulling the strings in the deeper line position. You've got Kessie. I see it all. It all works, and especially if you're going to bring in Belotti and have Silva, you've got to play the two. So two up top, that fits. That fits the mould. But I'm going to give you my favourite 11 and formation, and just feel free to give me your thoughts. I personally, and again, open this up to people listening as well. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter and leave comments in the YouTube video. But I'm going to be inclined to go with a 4-3-1-2. So I'll run through it really quickly. I've got Donnarumma in goal, of course. Conte at right back. I'm going to go with Bonucci and Romagnoli in the middle, with Rodriguez on the left. That obviously presents my first issue with Masaccio on the bench. Pretty sure he didn't sit on the bench, so that's the first issue.
Yeah.
Three in the midfield. I've gone for Kessie, Biglia, and Bonaventura. I think that trio kind of gives you a good mix of solidity, energy, and creativity. So I think they'll complement each other really well. The next one poses the next problem. I've gone with Hakan in that sort of central creative role, which kind of shoves Suso onto the bench, which is another issue. I'm sure you might disagree with me on that one. And then obviously having the two up top, provided we buy Belotti, again, fingers crossed,
Yeah.
I'm going to stick Belotti and Silva up top together. So that would be my preferred system and personnel. Any issues with that, Jace? Obviously, Masaccio and Suso being the two big absentees. I'm not sure if I'm forgetting anyone else, but would that work for you, or do you see you pick holes in that?
I can see how it could work, but yeah, I see what you're saying. I would go with the three and stick Masaccio in there. In my opinion, I agree with going with Hakan in that creative role. I think again that's why we brought him, and for what I've seen of him and what you've told me about him, he's definitely got that quality, and the fact that he's a free kick specialist. I think having him around on the pitch is definitely a plus. But yeah, it gives us options to change things, and we've got good cover in case of injuries. So I wouldn't completely disregard the 4-3-1-2, but I personally would go with the 3-5-2.
No, that's fair enough. All on Montella's head, as you mentioned earlier. The pressure on him to pick the right one in the right situations against the right opposition. So all on his hands, really. See what he does. I will mention, as you mentioned there, with Hakan being a free kick specialist, he had a free kick today against Dortmund. I had my phone ready, waiting for an absolute cut. So hit the wall and went out for a corner.
Yeah,
absolutely gutted, but no problem. I'm sure we'll see some beauties this season at some point. Okay, no, so good stuff. As I mentioned, leave your comments below. Let us know your thoughts on what you'd go with and who you'd pick. We'll spark up a good debate, I believe. It'd be interesting to hear thoughts. Finishing off with questions, Jace. Asan Milan Lewis has asked, how many more players do we really need and which players really need to go? Personally, I'd be absolutely fine if we stopped after Belotti. I think he's the last piece that we need to add. There is an argument potentially to add depth with another winger, just in case, if we do go with a 4-3-3, whether Suso gets injured or, Bonaventura, Hakan, whatever it may be. Maybe another winger, but that's not really on my priority list, to be honest. Can live without it. So yeah, in terms of more players coming in, Belotti, and that's job done for me. And then in terms of players that really need to go, I just want to see Paletta, Niang and Baka out the door as soon as possible. Not only to raise funds, but I think just to balance out as well spending, but also just to kind of make space in the squad and really kick-start this new cycle. So I'd like to see those three go. For you, Jace, how many more players do we need, and who do you want to see go?
I agree with you. To be honest, I think Belotti, Morata, but hopefully Belotti coming in, and then I agree. Those three need to go, and probably, like we talked about earlier, probably most definitely will go. Maybe then, like you say, one more attacking player, maybe a Kalinic, and then maybe using one of those 5 attackers that we would have left, or sorry, 4 attackers in the kind of the wide positions, depending on the formation, or going out and getting an out and out winger. I can't think of any that come to mind who would be available and realistic targets. But I think if we didn't get a winger, we wouldn't be completely lost, because we've got that depth in midfield to be able to change things around. But yeah, I agree. I think Belotti and get rid of those 3 players.
Definitely. I mean, in an ideal world, I think I'd like to see Abate and Montella go as well. I think, like we've mentioned today and in the last podcast, I think we've seen everything they can kind of contribute to the team, and I wouldn't say it's terrible, but it's just not good enough for me. But on the flip side, I think you've got to value their leadership. They're sort of imparting that wisdom, if you like, the Milan culture on the new players, and keeping that in the dressing room. I think keep them for another year and then maybe move on, but I don't expect them to leave. So yeah, those 3, Paletta, Niang and Bacca to go will be lovely. Just to pick up on your point, the next question from Milan_fan87, which right-wing player would be ideal if Suso doesn't stay? It is difficult. If you think about, like I said, the players that are available, it's kind of tough to really pick out a realistic and a decent addition. The only name I would pluck out for you is Rashid Ghazal. I believe he's being linked and he's available on a free. So I personally don't think we need to spend big again now. I think put everything into the Belotti or Morata deal and just bring in just someone to kind of make up the numbers for me. I don't think it needs to be, even if Suso does leave, I don't see it needs to kind of be another 20-30 million job. So I know you mentioned Kalinic there as well, maybe in addition, Jace, but do you agree with that? Maybe just put everything into the Belotti deal, and if you can pick up a decent free transfer, maybe that's another strategy to take. Yeah,
that'd be good. I guess in this situation, if Suso was sold and funds were raised, you could potentially just reinvest what was made back in another player. But like you say, already investing so much this pre-season, I think just picking up like you say a free transfer or just making do with what we have would work. There is a player I think Roma are very interested in Leicester's Mahrez, who is a quality player, but the money that Leicester are asking for him is ridiculous. I don't think he's worth that much, but I can see someone of his ability adding something to this team. Again, not potentially being a starter, so you wouldn't want to spend 30-40 million on someone who's got to sit on the bench, but someone of that quality. But again, like we say, there's no one really available for a decent price, or who you can realistically get.
Definitely not. And I just, completely off topic, I'd just like to mention I've just seen Arnautovic going to West Ham for 24 million.
Yeah,
that gave me a chuckle for the day. I can't. Definitely not buying anyone from the Premier League. That's an absolute joke. But no, we'll have to wait and see. Next question came from Stefano Giacomara, regular listener. Thanks again for your question. You can catch him on Twitter at Fanonono. Do you prefer a back 3 or a back 4 for defence? I think you've gone for a back 3, Jason.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I think the players we have now with Bonucci, I think we're just set up for a back 3. And we saw in the Premier League last year with Chelsea how effective having a back 3 with a player who can step up. For Chelsea it was David Luiz. For Milan it most definitely would be Bonucci if we were to do that. Who can step up and get play moving, and we've seen him do it for Italy. And I think if we can bring that to Milan, I think we'd have not only a strong chance of getting back into the Champions League, but a strong chance of challenging for the Scudetto.
Yeah, no. Even though I did say the 4-3-1-2, you like you said, you've got to look at it realistically and look at the Bonucci signing and think a back 3 probably would work. But everybody, we've got the tools to make it work, haven't we? I guess, like I said, Bonucci,
Yeah.
then Conte and Rodriguez out wide. Everything seems to be fitting into place for Montella to make that switch. So back three, wouldn't have any objections to it. But for me, I just like the all-round formation. I mean, obviously, again, that just brings back the issue, though, isn't it? Someone's going to miss out, whether it be, if you don't go with a back three, Musacchio is going to be missing out. If you go with a back three, then, who's missing out in midfield, because not everyone can fit into the team. So it's definitely a tough one, but we'll have to wait and see what Montella goes with when everyone's at his disposal. And then the second half of his question was, which signings are you impressed with and not impressed with after the first two games? Without a shadow of a doubt, easy one. Most impressed with Kessie. Been an absolute beast in the midfield. Needs to improve his distribution. He was a bit wayward with his passing today against Dortmund, but the way that he just covers ground, his sort of energy, his bite in the tackles, is just everything that we need in that midfield. So got to be impressed with him. I would add Musacchio, Rodriguez, Hakan. They've all shown bits and pieces, a bit positive, very positive in bits of their play. So happy with them. Much more to come, obviously. Hopefully, we'll see the first sights of Bonucci and those guys coming to China. But not impressed with Jace. I think it's to be expected. Is Barini. I mean, I'm not slamming the signing. I've not changed my mind. I think it's still just decent addition to add depth to the squad. But I think the fears that most people had in terms of his limitations may have come to the fore in the first couple of games, but it's a long way to go. And he's a cameo player at the end of the day. I'm not expecting him to be scoring 5 goals in every pre-season game, so no big deal for me. For you, most impressed with, least impressed with?
Yeah, I'd agree, Kessie. I think he was, a lot of expectation on him when we signed him. I think we were both very excited, and he hasn't disappointed. And again, it's difficult to say who I'm not impressed by, to be honest. Like, I agree, Barini hasn't done much, but I don't think he's been overly bad, as it were. And these are two very not difficult games to judge, but games where I wasn't really looking at players to kind of pick out. I was more kind of looking at the team and how the formation was looking and how the team was interacting. But I guess I'd have to agree with you. If I had to pick one who I could do without, it would be Barini, unfortunately, out of the new signings. But yeah, I guess I'm not reading too much into it, but definitely impressed by Kessie. But I can't wait to see Bonucci. To be honest, I think if you ask me this next week, that it might change. But at the minute, yeah, Kessie, definitely.
Good man. No, definitely. I think we're all looking forward to seeing Bonucci in a Milan top. I don't know if you saw his little Twitter, Instagram post of him kind of building up the hype, saying that he's ready to switch the balance in Italy over to Milan.
Yeah.
I think that got absolutely everyone pumped. So cannot wait to see him make his first appearance for Milan. But yeah, all good. Just a quick reminder for listeners, if you want to read more about financial fair play, there's a big, long article about it at acmilantalk.com where I try my best to explain it all as best I can. So have a listen to that and a read of that, sorry. And follow us on Twitter and Facebook at AC Milan Talk 1. But I think, having said that, Jace, that wraps us up this week, unless you've got anything else you need to add.
No, I think we've covered it all. Just looking forward to some more pre-season action and seeing some of these new signings in AC Milan shirts and seeing what they can bring to the team.
Absolutely. Not long to go. Let's see if Bonucci and those guys are ready to make their debuts next week against Bayern. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But echo your sentiments, Jace. Cannot wait. Good stuff, man. I think that wraps us up this week then. So nothing else but say goodbye to the people.
Goodbye to the people.